Okay, I think it's live now. Yeah. So I've been watching a lot of these impeachment videos. Uh, so, yes, I've been watching a lot of that. Um, the, there's this article called "The Common Misconception About, quote, High Crimes and Misdemeanors. The constitutional standard for impeachment is different from what's at play in a regular criminal trial" by Frank O. Bowman III, professor at the University of Missouri School of Law. October 22nd, 2019, on the Atlantic website. I will link it below. I haven't really, I just sort of skimmed it. I didn't read the, the article in detail. But what I got from this article, what I got, is that the Constitution, the United States Constitution contains treason and bribery. Is in Article 2. That's the kind of conduct. All right. So what it says. Treason and obviously criminal. There's a quote. Obviously criminal treason and bribery in Article 2's list of the kinds of words. Lists of the kinds of conduct for which the, quote, president, vice president, and all civil officers may be impeached. You can read the thing yourself. So, but this article is mainly about that phrase, high crimes and misdemeanors. I was like curious, what does that mean? And he goes through the high crimes and misdemeanors is not about ordinary criminality, as he says here. So what he's saying is, in order for the president to have engaged in conduct that would fit the description of high crime and misdemeanor, the conduct does not have to be criminal, meaning it does not have to violate some statute or against some principle in the common law. It doesn't have to violate that. And he goes into the history of this. Apparently this phrase was invented, the impeachment was invented by the British Parliament in 1376, quote, primarily as a legislative counterweight against royal abuses of power, end quote. Great Britain had never had a written constitution, as he says. Quote, another quote, critically, a great deal of the misconduct English Parliament, deemed impeachable wasn't criminal at all, at least in the sense of violating any pre-existing criminal statute or constituting any judge-created common law crime, end quote. So some of the examples he gives for which people were impeached was Parliament impeached high officials, was military mismanagement, neglect of duty or sheer ineptitude, I'm quoting here, giving the sovereign bad advice, especially about foreign affairs, All right, so this is they're talking about the impeachment of Warren Hastings, Governor General of Bengal. So this discussion was in 1787, and I quote, "Few, if any, of the charges against Hastings, the governor, were indictable crimes, but that was immaterial to Edmund Burke, the principal parliamentary prosecutor of Hastings. He said the charges, quote, were crimes not against forms, but against those eternal laws of justice which are our rule and our birthright. His offenses are not in formal technical language, but in reality, in substance and effect, high crimes and high misdemeanors." So when people say Donald Trump, is it illegal to talk about Trump? I don't know, but if you want to say that the president has to commit a crime in order to be impeached, no, he does not have to commit a crime. So that's the thing that you have to get here, is that it doesn't have to be a criminal offense. Okay. All right, so they wanted a phrase that was very flexible. All right, this is another quote. The beauty of, they were talking about, should the phrase maladministration be used? So this is in the Constitutional Convention. When they were discussing, apparently, George Mason of Virginia. Anyway, this is another quote. "The beauty of high crimes and misdemeanors from the perspective of the men of 1787 was that," it was 1787 Constitution Convention, anyway, "was that it provided both flexibility and some measure of guidance. Flexibility because it plainly pointed to the parliamentary practice of defining impeachable conduct on a case-by-case basis. Guidance because it incorporated by reference 400 years of prior practice on which one could rely in identifying the kinds and degrees of misbehavior that ought to be impeachable." So you can have this idea that it's flexible, but you can look to precedent to sort of figure out what kind of conduct you can impeach. Okay, so this is James Madison and Wilson Nicholas, and I quote in this article. Said abuse of the pardon power would be impeachable. Some founders said, would also follow from the receipt of foreign emoluments or presidential efforts to secure by trickery Senate ratification of a disadvantageous treaty. During the first Congress of 1789, Madison even argued that presidents could be impeached for, quote, wanton removal of meritorious officers. So the ambassador to Mary Jovanovic, so that's actually a reason that you can impeach someone. And there's a link to that speech, I think. So they're talking about like impeachable conduct is often purely political, and quote, and no previous statute is necessary to authorize an impeachment for any official misconduct. All right, so we get the idea. It doesn't have to be a crime, right? That's the thing. Okay, so quote, multiple judges, again from this, multiple judges have been impeached and some removed for non-criminal abuses or dereliction of office. Judges John Pickering 1803 and Mark Delahaye 1873 were impeached for drunkenness. They both were impeached for drunkenness or insanity for Pickering. Judges George English in 1926 and Harold Louderback 1933 were impeached wholly or in part for abusive or biased behavior that brought their courts into disrepute. Okay, so another they're talking about Richard Nixon's impeachment. So the committee, the committee staff observed in its okay, this is a quote, rather as the committee staff observed in its careful study of the question. So there's a link to that. High crimes and misdemeanors. Quote, high crimes and misdemeanors is a phrase that reaches far beyond crimes to embrace, quote, exceeding the powers of the office in derogation of those of another branch of government. Okay, quote, behaving in a manner grossly incompatible with the proper function of the office and employing the power of the office for an improper purpose or personal gain. All right. Okay. Okay. Anyway, all right. At the end, he says something like this. Impeachment is a quote. Impeachment is not an antique legalism, but an essential tool for securing the safety of the American constitutional order against those who would corrupt or destroy it. All right. Anyway, so I've seen a few of the. I mean, I've seen one whole the Jovanovic thing. What 6+ hours of it. So I've been sort of seeing this. So what would I say about this? I would say this is actually quite it's actually, if you look at the thing, you can sort of come to the conclusion, oh, this is easy. Donald Trump should be impeached because he sort of he was sort of essentially, I don't know if he was bribing, but maybe he was extorting, or he was sort of withholding the money to the Ukraine unless the investigation into the Biden thing would be performed, and also the Oval Office meeting. So here is what I will say, okay? Let's leave the whole the other issue, the Ukraine meddling into, actually yeah. Let's talk about the whole Donald Trump's withholding the security assistance to Ukraine. The allegation is that he withheld the security assistance to Ukraine until the Ukrainians would investigate, on the condition that the Ukrainians have to investigate the Biden Burisma, that company. All right. That Biden sacked the prosecutor, the previous prosecutor, because they were going to investigate the company. The board had Biden's son on it. and Biden sacked that prosecutor, and then they're making, oh well, why did Biden sack the prosecutor when the prosecutor was going to investigate that company and the board of the company? And okay, this is very a lot of things are here. Okay, but here, okay, look. In order for the United States to secure or promote its national interest, it would be in United States best. It would be in United States best interest if Ukraine was not a corrupt country, right? The U.S. wanted to make Ukraine a less corrupt country, so it could by Ukraine being not corrupt, American businesses can do trade there, and it can basically be like a sort of a U.S. kind of satellite, because apparently in the Soviet way of doing government, there's a lot of corruption, bribery, and all that. But the United States wanted the Ukraine to be less corrupt, in order for the type of U.S. type of politics to happen in Ukraine, so you can so Ukraine becomes more like the U.S. I'm not explaining this well, but anyway. So the promotion of less corruption or no corruption in Ukraine is in the U.S. national interest, right? So the ambassador to Ukraine, Mary Yovanovitch, was trying to make Ukraine a less corrupt country, so before she even got there, I think it's my understanding that this company called Burisma or whatever, that company was corrupt. And in order for the company, I think what they did was like they sacked the whole board of the company, and they reconstituted a new board to give the impression that, okay, now this company is not going to have corrupt members on its board. And one of the people put on the board was Biden's son, Hunter Biden. And but apparently, I think this was still when the corrupt prosecutor was still had the job. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much all of that. What I'm saying is, investigating the company, the Burisma company, how do you pronounce it? Burisma? Yeah, Burisma. Okay, Burisma. The gas company, Ukraine. Okay. So, investigating the Burisma company is good. It's good because it's a way of taking down corruption, basically. So investigating the company is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. The reason Biden got that prosecutor fired was because the reason that it was given was that because he himself was a corrupt person. I don't know the details of it, but let's just the prosecutor was fired because he was corrupt. But let's not forget but investigating the company is a good thing, because you do want Ukraine to be you do want to remove corruption in Ukrainian politics. So investigating a company is not the problem. Now, whether Biden himself got the crown prosecutor fired because his son might have behaved in a corrupt way, and if the prosecutor continued the investigation, this corruption of his son would be found. No. I don't. Let's not. Even, okay, let's look at it now. From today, should that Burisma company be investigated? Yes, it should be investigated. Why? Because, and let's not forget, the investigation wasn't closed. The investigation was put on hold. So today, right now, the investigation into Burisma should be restarted. You should do that. That is a good thing to do. But the problem here is not whether the investigation should or should not happen. The problem here is that did Donald Trump, did he, in asking the newly elected president of Ukraine to conduct these investigations, did he do so in order to dig up some dirt on Biden, because then he can use that dirt to further his 2020 presidential campaign? Anyway, I'm still having some questions over that, but here's the thing, all right? Is it good for the United States president to insert his personal interests, his personal interest into foreign policy decisions, engagements, right? Let's say that the securities money was put on hold because the United States wanted to know if other European countries were giving enough money to Ukraine, and the US wanted to know if the money would be spent properly, right? Let's say that's a legitimate reason to put a pause on the security funds. Let's say that is what happened, right? Let's say Donald Trump did not even, let's say he did not put a hold on the security assistance because he wanted to pressure the Ukrainian president into starting these investigations. Let's say that did not happen. Let's say the pause on the security assistance was a legitimate pause because the administration wanted to know if other countries were doing enough, and also if I think if Ukraine was it was not so corrupt that the money would be used for other reasons or something. Okay, let's say I think that's a legitimate reason to put a hold on the funds. I don't want to think about the White House meeting just now, but let's say there was a legitimate reason, all right, to put the hold. Despite that, as you can understand from that phone call transcript, the July 25 phone call, Trump says, I would like to do what he says, though I would like you to do this, right? So it wasn't like Trump was saying, hey, President, I would like you to make sure Ukraine is not corrupt, and then I would give you, I just want to make sure that your political party or whatever is not going to be corrupt. So then I'm happy to release these funds because I just wanted to check, I want to just make sure this is there's no corruption going there. I just wanted to check. But he didn't do that. He specifically asked about the investigation, right? He specifically asked about that. He did not ask about corruption in some general sense. He asked it in a very specific sense about that Biden case. This is why, even if there was a legitimate reason to hold the security funds, creates an impression that Trump was trying to get his potential opponent in the 2020 elections cast doubt. Even let's say Biden did not do anything improper or illegal, but like, see, Trump wanted the president to even go to CNN and announce the investigation. You see, and then someone said, what's that? Sondland said he did. Sondland said something like, "Oh, he just wanted the investigation to be announced. I don't think he even cared if the investigation actually happened." So I think what this sort of conveys that what Trump wanted was not really removing corruption or even investigating the Biden case. What he wanted was to cast doubt on Biden's character and sort of put like some kind of a red flag. Hey, if the Ukrainian president went to CNN or announced, "Hey, we're going to investigate this Burisma thing," and the Burisma means there's this Joe Biden connection, then people will be like, "Oh, wait a minute, you mean Joe Biden is being investigated by Ukraine? Did he do something wrong?" So even if Biden did not do anything wrong, it creates a bad look, optics or something. So, and that publicity would be for personal gain. The bad publicity that would be given to Biden if the Ukrainians announced an investigation, which they did not even have to do. Because let's just assume Donald Trump didn't even care, because look at it, he didn't talk about corruption in general. He specifically listed that Biden investigation, the Burisma thing. So I think what Donald Trump, I'm just going to speculate here. I think we can say what Donald Trump wanted was his opponent Biden to have some kind of a bad publicity. This was what he wanted, I think. And that can be considered personal gain, because that can benefit his re-election campaign. And so the question here is, do we want to, does the United States want its president to behave in this way? Do you want to, because you see, the United States president is supposed to behave in the most proper way. He's setting an example, a standard for how diplomacy, politics should be conducted on the world stage. And if the president of the United States is asking another foreign head of state to conduct investigations or even publicize it, because this would give him a personal boost or a personal benefit in the sense that his opponent might have some bad publicity. I mean, it doesn't seem like that doesn't seem like it's a, I don't know if that's criminal, but doesn't that sort of not feel like that is what a president should be doing? Doesn't that sort of tarnish the office of the presidency? Doesn't that sort of set a bad example, or doesn't that sort of diminish the institution of the presidency, especially on the world stage? We're not talking about within America, we're talking about on the world stage, on the global stage. If you want other countries to behave in a impeccable manner, or in a fair, transparent manner, if you want if you want democracy, if you want this high standard of ethics and legality, and just if you're trying to promote that, okay, if that's what you want the world to see and the world to behave, and your president, who represents the highest symbol of this kind of fair, transparent, open, democratic, if the presidency, if the office of the presidency represents that, doesn't Donald Trump's behavior in trying to secure some personal gain within a context in which, you see, we cannot remove the fact that the White House meeting was sort of denied, but yeah, eventually it was given. The funds were put on hold. See, when you put the funds on hold, you're sort of putting pressure. You see, it's like, all right, let's put pressure on these guys to do the investigation or announce the investigation because this is what we want. So let's say Trump was like, oh, he was going to eventually release the funds anyway, but he was trying to put, let's say, his behavior, by holding, putting a pause on the funds, denying the visit to the White House. These are sort of, that's the context of this whole thing, and you can't remove that. So he's sort of trying to put pressure on the Ukrainian president to do this for him, right? He didn't ask him explicitly, but he's sort of indicating, hey, do this for me, do this for me. And it may very well be that if the Ukrainian president didn't do it, Donald Trump could have released the funds anyway, because he was like, oh, all right, fine, okay, I guess he's not gonna do it, but I'll release the funds because the funds are important in Ukraine. But it feels like, okay, I'm gonna try this strategy of putting pressure on the Ukrainian president to get him to do this. Anyway, it just looks bad, all right? So to me, I think the reason why the Donald Trump, the U.S. president, should be impeached is because he brings the office of the presidency into disrepute. His behavior is not becoming of the president of the United States. I'm not saying he did any crime. I'm not saying he was incompetent or anything like that. I'm just saying his behavior brings the office of the presidency, it diminishes, tarnishes the office of the presidency in a manner that leaves a bad taste in one's mouth. That's as much as I can say it. It just tarnishes the image of the president. The president of the United States should not be allowing domestic internal politics to influence foreign policy decisions, especially when these decisions have real national security interests, because having a Ukraine that is not corrupt is in the national security interests of the United States, because they're having in this war with Russia. So I guess, yeah, you don't need to prove a crime. You don't need to prove that Trump bribed or something. You can just say that he brought the office of the presidency into this disrepute, or he allowed his personal interest as a factor. He brought his desire to have the Biden tarnished. He brought that his desire, that interest, into this kind of transaction, whereas the foreign policy, the funds to the Ukrainians, the security funds, and the White House meeting, which would have been a symbolic aid to the Ukrainian president. They should, in meeting these, in giving the aid, in giving the White House meeting, the president should not have his own personal political domestic considerations play a factor in whether or not aid should be suspended or the meeting should be given. Right? You see, he's allowing the domestic political affairs, his personal goals and aspirations, to interfere with this foreign kind of relationship. Anyway, so I think it's very interesting. I like listening to this. All right, so how long have I gone into? All right, so I'll off this